Hey y'all, it's Roger with Kinsta. I'm joined again by a good friend, Aaron. Hey Aaron, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. How are you, Roger?
You know, I'm doing really well. It's already April. I don't know how that happened, but here we are. Which means it's time for another update as to the work that you're doing on the WordPress project. We've got 6.8 is, we're at the release candidate stage now, right?
Yep, so we did the second release candidate this week. We have one more scheduled for next week. We often end up doing another unscheduled one if there's a couple, smaller changes that happen after the final one, just to make sure that everything is out there and ready. And then we're about a little over a week and a half away from getting the final release out.
Okay, very exciting. Tax day, right?
Mm-hmm.
In the U.S. anyway.
Yep. U.S. tax day, yeah.
Yes. Okay, so, kind of just from a newbie's perspective, release candidate, what does that actually mean?
So a release candidate is what we think could be the final version of the release. It is, has all the changes that we intend to make, but what we need right now is more testing. Is kind of our last calls for this is a good chance for you to come in and test it, is what we think the final release will be. There's often some changes that happen from here, but the changes from here are bug fixes or are generally things that don't require you to go back in and do much testing.
Okay.
Hopefully.
Okay. All right. Very exciting. So on that topic of testers, I feel like in the software world, there's never enough testing. We can always use more testing. And with WordPress, that feels like it's even more exacerbated because of the theme and plugin ecosystem. Anybody can create a theme or a plugin, which means anybody can create a theme or a plugin. So they really need to be testing these things out. From an individual site owner's perspective, how do you recommend that they maybe go about testing their site?
Well, one of the best ways to test is if you can set up a staging site through your host, or if you can't do that, if you can pull your site down locally and use a local testing tool, do that, and then just go through a couple of motions of what you normally do on your site. If you normally are just you have a site that's fairly static, maybe you update a few pages here and there, just go in and make an update on those pages. Make sure that it looks right. Make sure that it looks good. There is a plugin called the beta tester plugin that you can install, and this will allow you to easily test with the release candidate. And so you can install that, and a couple of clicks later, you will have the release candidate running on that site. I wouldn't recommend doing this on production.
Yes.
But doing this on a staging site or doing this locally will help you test. And then also, there is a document that the core team puts out called the field guide that kind of summarizes all of the big changes. Look through that. Look through and see, is there anything that stands out to you as being this might impact my workflow, and try to test that workflow.
Okay, excellent. And just to kind of recap the steps here, have a host that has staging environment is the best situation. Create a staging environment, install the beta test plugin, and with that you can then choose different versions that you want to test out, and then just use your site as you normally would. Maybe testing out your form fill, make sure that it's still working. Anything that's really essential for your business, you should be checking out. So switching gears a little bit, if you're a plugin developer, what does that process change in any way for them?
So I think if you're a plugin developer, ideally you have some automated testing already in place, and you have that set up, and you're running it against the trunk version of WordPress, so that any change the core team makes, you're testing against your code. I think that is the ideal perfect world. Outside of that world that many of us do in fact live in, I would, just give your plugin a full solid test, the same testing that you would put it through before a release of your plugin. Because you're going to want to do a release anyways that says that the compatibility of your plugin is updated. If you don't update the tag that's compatible up to every 3 releases, it starts getting delisted from the WordPress plugin repository. So making sure that you're testing, ideally every release, but at a minimum every 3 is important.
Okay, and that's a really great point to bring up there, because I will see plugins that are showing out of date, and I mean, as a user, I'm immediately like, well, I need to find a different plugin to use, and it might just be because they just haven't run a test recently to kind of update the repository to let them know about that. So that's great to know. Kind of backing up for a second, for that automated testing, are there any resources, websites that you would recommend if somebody hasn't done that yet that they should go to learn how to do that?
So the WPCLI tool has a scaffold command, and that allows you to scaffold out automated tests. So that will get you started with, having some basic automated tests. And then look around GitHub, and you can see a couple of different plugins that have, configurations for running those automated tests. The performance plugin from the WordPress team, the Gutenberg plugin, both of those have examples of like how they're running and testing against different versions of WordPress.
Okay, excellent. That sounds really important and helpful to do. All right, switching gears a little bit, and we've talked about 6.8 in prior episodes. What has you really excited about this release?
So, I mean, the thing that probably excites me the most is the something coming out of the performance team, and that is some preloading improvements. And so basically, this has been a plugin. I've had the plugin running on my site for, I feel like at least a year, possibly longer. I don't know. But what it does is it will, instead of waiting until after you've clicked on a link to start loading the page in the background, when you start to click on the link, that is when it starts to load it in the background. And so, like, while that seems like a little amount, that might be, half of a second. That half of a second means that your site is now a half of a second faster to load. And so, like, this is a exciting improvement there, because it's, not that much, like, there's a bunch of different strategies when it comes to this preloading, and WordPress by default is going with the most risk adverse one, the one that's going to cause the least amount of extra strain. So it's, the start of the click down. And that is, not going to harm hosts. So hosts aren't going to have a ton of extra, pages loading that aren't actually, hitting the site. And so, it's going to not damaging servers, but also it means that, like, websites are just going to be just that little bit faster, and it's going to be a little bit faster for everyone. One of the fun things about seeing changes like this in WordPress and seeing the scale of WordPress is we're going to be able to see the web as a whole get faster for everyone. If you think about, like, every time you click on a link, if it saves a half of a second, like, across your entire day, if you look at 100 web pages in a day, that's 50 seconds you're saving, almost a minute. And that is, think about how many people are in your town. Like, if you live in a small town, you got 10,000 people. Each of them is saving almost a minute. You're saving 10,000 minutes a day of internet traffic.
Okay, that's very impressive, and it's those little gains. And I think the important thing for people to keep in mind, right, is we're all used to our apps on our phones, and these are already doing a lot of this type of stuff, and that's why they feel so snappy. And the web, we've got a lot of more constraints that we have to deal with. Hosts need to be considered, so we're not overloading them. But any chance we get to just make things faster, at the end of the day, that's all people are looking for. So that is exciting news to hear. Is there any lesser features that are of interest?
So lesser things that excite me this time around. One that's completely under the hood that is not going to affect 99.99999% of people is that we've been able to do an update to the hashing of passwords to make them just a bit more secure. WordPress has used a library that is very secure, that there are no known vulnerabilities to its hashing or anything, but it is older. And we're now able to update to a much better, more modern.
That's awesome. And I think I saw something that's bcrypt is what's being enabled. Okay. All right. We're getting in the weeds here, but I think one of the common complaints or criticisms of WordPress is security, and so this is just checking a box of like, well, nope, not like get that off your list. So that's really important, I think, for talking to clients about and just letting them know, hey, WordPress is getting more secure all the time, and it already is secure. So that's really great. As far as the future of the project and looking forward, where do you think that contributors could come in and really help the project the most at this point?
So I think that the featured plugins are what are going to get are where a lot of the big improvements are going to come from in 2025. I think the Performance Lab is one example. I think that Gutenberg will continue to be a place where we see a lot of the innovation and exciting things happening. But I also think that there's a couple of other ones. There's a preferred languages one that has been worked on for a while. And so now, while I am very bad at any language besides English, there are many people that are very good at multiple languages. And sometimes languages aren't necessarily like, perfectly translated in every single form. There's a different version of German for, Germany than there is for Switzerland, for example. And, there might be, different preferred languages. And so being able to have the, saying, okay, well, my first choice is Swiss German, my second choice is German German, and my third choice is English. And so like, as if strings aren't translated, it falls back in the order that you want it to.
Nice. Okay. No, that sounds really cool. Do you think, as far as the capabilities of contributors to help with these projects, is this very JavaScript heavy, PHP? Like, what skills should people be bringing for this?
It's everything. So, I mean, it's coding, but it's also not coding. It is people that have good project management skills, being able to come in and help, like, okay, let's look and see, like, are there tickets that are actually like duplicates of each other? Can we combine? Has something, has this bug been fixed inadvertently by, some other change? Can we close it? That is incredibly valuable. Designers are, always, making things better. Being able to have that eye to know, like, okay, actually we need to, make the change like in this way. I think that is, something that's super helpful. Even people that can help promote what's going on. If you're a good writer and can just write the release notes and say like, okay, let me summarize all of these changes that other people have made. That can be a huge contribution.
Excellent. All right. So lots of room for people to come in and help out. That's, I think there's always that mindset, and I know I suffer from this, is, you have to be a coder to contribute, and that's not true. Like, there's a lot of ways to contribute to the project outside of writing code. So that's really helpful. Aaron, I always appreciate these calls. I appreciate your time. I appreciate you working on the project so tirelessly. If people want to get in touch with you, what's the best way for them to reach out?
Come to my website, aaron.jorb.in.
Fantastic. All right, Aaron, it's great to see you, and I'll talk to you again soon.
Yeah, sounds great.